Hi, welcome to Hello Church. I am Wade Bearden.
And I am Justin Trapp. And today we're going to be talking about embarrassing stories, things you've said that were embarrassing while preaching.
Yeah.
I have a lot of stories of my own.
How do you get back from saying something embarrassing or maybe even offensive? We're going to be discussing that in this episode. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure to ring the bell and leave us some comments. Tell us about one of your embarrassing moments, if it's appropriate, in the comments. We'd love to read those, and I'm sure other people would love to read those as well. If you subscribe or listen to us on Apple iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher, make sure to leave us a rating and a review. And tweet us at Ministry Pass with your embarrassing stories. As I mentioned, I think everyone will enjoy just kind of swapping those because they're usually great.
Yeah, well, and one of the things I'm interested in talking through too is like, how do you recover from an embarrassing moment during a sermon? Mm-hmm. Maybe you said something that was embarrassing, or heaven forbid, you said something that was offensive, or you said something that was theologically incorrect. Like, how do you go back and correct that, or how do you move forward in the sermon? Is the sermon just lost from that moment? I can tell you, I'll start with one of my stories. It was literally one of my first sermons at my first job. I was 19 years old. I was a junior high pastor at a large church. We had 150 junior high kids in the room. Why anyone gave me that job, first of all, that's another podcast.
That's 150 junior high kids. Is that a job or is that a punishment? I'm not sure.
Right. And with junior high kids, you know, they're like the puppy dogs, right? They're just like glad to see you and wagging their tail, and they laugh at everything and they giggle at everything. But there was this one sermon, I'm telling you, it was like first or second sermon right out of the gate, and I was trying to have something like really creative and really fun. And so I was on the parable of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, of the boy who gave his lunch to Jesus to be used to feed the 5,000. Excuse me. And one of the things that was interesting is, no, I don't have COVID. I know that thought ran through your mind just now. So one of the things that was interesting is the point of the sermon was, hey, just be willing to give what you have to the Lord so that he can use it to further the gospel. And so I had this little illustration where I had a sack lunch, and I was like, what is the perfect sack lunch, right? So for me at the time, again, my audience, junior hires. So I had a sack lunch and I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in there. Are you a soft Cheetos guy or a crunchy Cheetos guy?
What are soft Cheetos?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. So I had crunchy Cheetos.
Okay,
the real Cheetos. And then
I like crunchy Cheetos.
And then I had those desserts, the ding dongs.
Okay, yeah.
And then I had a Dr. Pepper.
Okay.
You already know where this is going, right?
Yeah.
So I'm in the middle of like the heated part of the message.
It's like Chekhov's gun. It's like I had some ding dongs in my sack lunch. It's like, okay, we know we're going to come back to that later.
Yeah, basically. We're about to circle right back to that. And so I'm in the middle of like this passionate part of the message. Like if you could just give what you have to the Lord, he will use it. And I said, how would the disciples reacted if Jesus came to them and said, hey, give me your ding dong, and I literally, it was like the first thing that came to my mind, and I was trying to pick something out of the lunch why I chose ding dongs. And I literally, it was just giggling for the next 15 minutes, and I was frustrated. They thought it was so funny. And they brought it up to me for months on end. Hey, Pastor Justin, remember you talked about ding dongs in the sermon? That was so funny.
You're like, I can't eat a ding dong in public again.
Nope.
Or a junior high kid's going to come up to me like, hey, remember. If you would have said that in an adult sermon, it would have been bad. You can just close service with a junior high. You just be like, hey, guys, let's just pray. Yeah. We all need prayer. It's funny because when you're a youth pastor, you can't say duty at all, right? You're like, it's our duty as Christians. You can't say that. It's funny because you have these embarrassing moments where you say something and you don't mean to say it. And then there are other moments when you plan to say something, you just didn't think it through.
Yeah.
And one of the best examples, I didn't actually do this. I witnessed this. But we had a Christmas service at a church I was a youth pastor at. And it was one of those fun productions, and all the kids were in the Sunday morning service with us. Usually they go to children's church. So they're in the service with us. And the pastor, he comes out, and we're going to be talking, if you have kids listening, we're going to be talking about Santa for a moment, wink, wink. He comes out in the first line of his message. He says, I remember the day I stopped believing in Santa Claus. I remember when I found out he wasn't real. And there was this gasp in the audience, not from the kids. The kids were just shocked. All the parents were diving, covering kids' ears. They were saying, no, this is a fake story. This is, he's just pretending.
Oh,
and
man.
I call it the day Santa died.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
How do you recover from that? With the children.
He was oblivious until afterwards.
With the future of your church, right?
Yeah, and during messages, you'll say something that ends up being embarrassing.
Yeah.
You'll say something that you just planned and it just doesn't go over right. And sometimes you say something accidentally offensive. And maybe it's something you don't mean to say, or maybe it's even a blind spot where you think about it, you're like, oh, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But from different perspectives, it could mean different things. And so we want to kind of discuss that. This is fun because we can kind of share some stories. There's also another scenario when you get interrupted by someone else. So one day I was preaching, and you were there that day.
I was there. I remember this.
You were there this day. And I was talking about joy. And at first, I had to define joy at the beginning of the message. So is joy just being happy, right? And I was sharing different quotes and illustrations from modern culture to talk about happiness and how happiness is fleeting. Happiness is really kind of based on your circumstances. And so before I read the text, I was setting the stage, and I played a video, and it's kind of famous. It's from Tom Brady. I think it was after he had won a couple of Super Bowls. And he's in this interview, and he says, I won some Super Bowls, and I just, I keep asking myself, there's got to be more. There's got to be more. And that was a good introduction to, okay.
It was at the beginning of your message.
Very beginning of the message. A good introduction to happiness, joy. What is that? The difference between the two. And the video ended, and a gentleman stood up in the audience and yelled, I thought this was a Christian church. I thought they preached the Bible here.
I thought they preached from the Bible or something like that.
And I was confused at first, and I go, excuse me? And so he said it again. I thought they preached the Bible here. And then it just really took me off guard, and he busted out of the doors, and he yelled, I think he yelled, heresy, heresy, and he was gone. And that was just a wild scenario. And I was stunned, and I think in that moment, what I probably should have done is I probably should have said, hey, let's just stop and pray for a moment and refocus, and let's pray for this gentleman because there's something going on in his life that made him do this.
Yeah. And he used to ride by on his bicycle to church and cuss us out. And he may have had a few friends traveling with him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So I should have just paused and been like, hey, let's pray for let's say a word of prayer. But I kind of stumbled over, and eventually I got people back. But these scenarios will come, and we have to kind of prepare beforehand for them so we don't lose the audience, we don't lose the message, and we find a way to transition and even to show love in the middle of all these circumstances.
Yeah, I think it's important, especially, I remember I was there, and that was really awkward, but I thought you handled it very, very well. And I don't think people couldn't, once they move past like the next few moments, everyone could refocus and get a light. I think that's important. Like if you say something dumb, if you say something embarrassing, you can move forward. Just refocus yourself, and it's okay to acknowledge the moment. I think a lot of times people try to like ignore it, and it becomes like this massive elephant in the room. And it's okay to just be self-deprecating, or just say, hey, you know what? That's awkward.
Yeah.
That kind of actually makes everyone laugh a lot of times when you just acknowledge, like, this is awkward. If you say something offensive, I think it's also a good opportunity to consider what you've said. And maybe sometimes you don't realize what you said is offensive. You can come back, and if an apology is needed, that's okay. Like, it's okay to say, hey, you know what? I said this. It's not what I meant, or that's not what I intended. and I apologize for it. I think it's totally fine for us to even try to make amends on things we've said. And if you've said something that maybe didn't align theologically with your beliefs, or you misspoke, it's okay to come circle back around maybe the next message, or at the end of the sermon if you think about it, because you're preaching. It's really easy to say something wrong or incorrect, or to lose your thoughts, or to lose your train of thoughts. Even in a podcast, right? I can lose my train of thought. In a 45-minute sermon, you're even there's more opportunities to misspeak. And so just remember, relax. It's okay. We all have embarrassing stories. In fact, I have a story that, again, it was with junior hires. So it seems like it's really easy to lose the audience with junior hires, right? It is. So we were talking about sexual purity and all of those types of conversations with junior hires. And I had my purity ring on, and I was at the end of my message, and I pulled my purity ring off, and I was trying to make a point about, here's what this purity ring stands for, and here's what it means, and you can follow this, be like me, that making myself the hero. And I accidentally dropped the ring, and it literally just hit the floor and bounced 15 feet and hit every metal chair on the way down. And this herd of junior hires run to get it, and bring it back to me. And I was so frustrated because I was it was such a serious moment for me. And it was it went off the rails. The kids were giggling. I dropped the ring. I couldn't recover after that.
Well, and it brings to mind this one principle that I think helps with the topic we're talking about, but just sermons in general, is if you're going to use some sort of illustration or slide or video, whatever it is, make sure you practice beforehand. I remember running a youth camp, and this speaker wanted me to play a clip, and it was back before all the clips were on computers. You were hitting play on a DVD and then hitting pause, and he's like, okay, play the clip, stop it immediately here, because if you don't, there is a curse word 1 second later, right? And I prayed, and God allowed me to hit the pause button at the right moment. There was no curse words. But there have been times when people have played clips or something, and they don't test it out beforehand, and as a result, something bad happens. I remember doing an illustration with a pastor, and he was using, it's kind of a classic story, but it's about gossip, and this person gossips and tries to apologize to the pastor, and the pastor says, hey, give me a ripped up pillow with feathers, and let's go outside. And they throw it up into the wind, and the feathers kind of go everywhere, and they're like, okay, go collect the feathers. And they're like, oh, I can't, it's impossible. And he's like, that's gossip, right? It just spreads. So the pastor, he was like, hey, I want you to help me. I'm going to turn the fan on, and you throw the feathers up. Well, the fan was, I don't know, probably the weakest fan ever made, and the feathers just went up and just landed in a big pile, which ruined the entire illustration, because it's like, oh, gossip, right? It's supposed to be you can't collect it, but you can actually. So make sure to test things out. Make sure to read through your slides. I've seen typos that were very embarrassing and ended up being very inappropriate.
Oh, man.
And you've got to make sure. So have that in mind. And to what you're saying too is, make it a teachable moment and be willing to apologize. Have the humility, because we don't really know how to apologize. When a politician or somebody messes up, they're so scared of admitting guilt.
Because it could be used against them on a campaign video or something.
It could be. But as Christians, we have to be willing to say, I was wrong. I don't mean to offend, but you know what? My words did offend. So I want to apologize for that. Now, that's a little bit different than just an embarrassing moment. That's us actually saying something that is offensive. And then two, this is kind of an interesting experiment. I've been at a church where a guest speaker said something that was very offensive, and my pastor had to handle it with grace, but he apologized on behalf of bringing this individual in. And so we have to be open to that too, because we want to model the behavior we want to see in the people around us.
So I have one last story before we end it. And I would love, we would love to hear your stories. Put it in the comments below. Everyone will find pleasure out of reading, your embarrassing stories, laughing with you, right? Not at you. But the last story I have is probably my most embarrassing moment in ministry. And I wasn't preaching, but you said something about text going up on the screen. And it seems like all my embarrassing stories were when I'm like my first 2 years in ministry. Just a lot to learn, young Padawan, right?
You're beginning to preach every week, and maybe you're not used to it. And so if you're not careful, it happens.
So I was editing a graduation video, and we had 20 graduates that year. And so it's like this, slideshow, and it's taking forever, right? I'm gathering all the photos from the parents, and I'm for 20 graduates, and it's just this long video. I'm having to use like 7 songs, right? And it's like the video that nobody cares to watch, but the parents, when their child is up on the screen graduating, and we all like suffer through the rest of it. Well, I put this placeholder text and like right in the middle, and basically it was notes for myself that said waiting on parents for photos. And literally everyone knows where this is going. And I got busy, and I rendered out the video, and I didn't watch it all the way through. And I just completely forgot about it. And we go to this person, and her name was Avery, and we get to Avery's spot, and it shows Avery, and then the next slide says waiting for parents for photos. And I sat there absolutely mortified.
As Amy Grant's "Now as the Years Go By" song plays.
As the years go by. And I literally was like, this is my most embarrassing moment. And so I walk out in the hallway right afterwards, and they're like leaving in the middle of service, and I was just like so apologetic, and they just gave me this blank stare, like I'm not hearing the words that are coming out of your mouth. Like it didn't matter. I was apologizing. They were embarrassed. I had embarrassed them probably more than I'd embarrassed myself. I felt so terrible.
And it kind of goes back to what you said is be willing to apologize in service. There's also the balance of like be willing to just acknowledge it and let it roll off your shoulders, because when a pastor tries to defend or clarify too much, they just dig holes. And there's all these clips online of just making it worse. Just stop and be like, oh man, that was weird. Let's laugh. Ha ha. Okay, let's move forward.
Some of them aren't even appropriate to bring up. So I'll just say you can YouTube preaching embarrassing moments, and you'll find a collection.
I've been there before, and I've witnessed it. Listeners, we want to thank you for tuning in to this episode of Hello Church. As always, make sure to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Tell us your embarrassing stories. We are excited about upcoming episodes. We've got some great content coming your way, and we want to get the word out on the podcast. So perhaps this week, email a link to your friends or share the podcast with them, pastors who are doing the work in ministry like you are. And we hope that this will be a tool as they continue to grow and be more effective as ministers of the gospel.
Next episode, 5 places to find engaging sermon illustrations. We're excited to talk about that. We'll see you next time.
See ya.